Introduction to Classical Tibetan, Lesson 3-4. Now that we've covered verbs, we can begin to start looking at complete sentences. Remember that when approaching a Tibetan sentence, the type of verb that's used can give us a lot of information. This is why the verb is the first thing to look at in a sentence. The main verb always occurs at the end of a sentence. Remember that the infinitive form of a verb ends in pa or ba. When a verb occurs as the main or final verb in a sentence, however, this pa or ba is not found. Verbs can change with respect to present, past, and future tenses and the imperative mood, but verbs do not change with respect to person or number. Many verbs change their spelling with respect to tense. Some, however, do not. Refer to the charts in Lesson 3 for examples of verbs with 1, 2, 3, and 4 different spellings. If a verb is the same for different tenses, then an auxiliary verb may be joined to the main verb to clarify its tense. We won't discuss this until Lesson 7. Otherwise, the tense of the verb has to be inferred from context if its spelling doesn't change. Have a look at the verb chart provided at the top of our Moodle site for help determining the spellings of verbs in different tenses. There are 4 different types of verbs. There are linking verbs, yin and min. These are usually translated as a version of to be. These kinds of verbs equate 2 things. For example, Gong Bupa Yin is translated as he is Tibetan. The linking verb yin equates the subject, kon, with the predicate, bupa. Sometimes the verb can be omitted. If you do not see a final verb at the end of a sentence, you can supply a yin. Existential verbs, ye and me, indicate the existence of something or someone. So if we say, Gompa ye, this means monasteries exist, or there are monasteries. Or, because number isn't indicated here, possibly there is a monastery. Existential verbs can also show the existence of something in a location by adding the particle la. So we could say something like dak bayu la yu, which means I am, or literally I exist, in, and this is how we should understand the function of the la particle at this point, Nepal. I am in Nepal. If we put a la particle after the subject instead of after the predicate, a sentence with an existential verb can show possession. For example, Nala diwa shiyu means I have a question. Literally, to me or for me, a question exists. The third type of verb is a transitive verb. This is a kind of verb that has an agent that acts on an object that is different than itself. For example, the monk turns his prayer wheel has the transitive verb turns. The subject, the monk, is acting on an object, his prayer wheel. Intransitive verbs, on the other hand, have an agent that does not act on an object different from itself. For example, the wheel turns. Here, the verb turns doesn't take an object. The subject, the wheel, doesn't act on anything else. The wheel isn't turning something else, it's simply turning. Some verbs are always transitive, some are always intransitive, and some can be both, depending on context. In Tibetan, transitive and intransitive forms of verbs with the same meaning can be spelled differently. Let's look at a few example sentences. Tumpa lana mepa dzogpe sange yino. Look at the final verb. It's yin. So we know that this is a sentence that's equating 2 things. So what are the 2 things? Well, let's start by looking for 2 nominal groups. Now, it might be easier to start from the right and work our way to the left. So first we have sange, connected to something with a connective particle. So we know that whatever comes before sange must go together with it. What do we find? Dzogpa, complete or perfect. So Dzogpe Sangye is perfect Buddha. Now we don't find any kind of connective particle to the left of Dzogpa, so we can be fairly certain that everything that's left is the subject of the sentence and is the thing that is being equated to a perfect Buddha, Dzogpe Sangye. So we have Lana Mepa, unsurpassed. This is an adjective, so it must be modifying a noun that comes before it. And looking to the left, we see Tumpa, teacher. Tumpa Lana Mepa is the unsurpassed teacher. So, altogether, this sentence says, the unsurpassed teacher is the perfect Buddha. All right, let's try another one. Tsen dang dempe lama mangpo me. We have the existential verb, me, at the end. So we know that something doesn't exist. We don't see any la particles to indicate non-existence in a place or lack of possession, so we can assume that everything in front of the me is the subject of the sentence. So let's work from right to left. Mangpo, many. Many what? Lama, gurus. Okay, so far this much says there are not many gurus, or many gurus do not exist. Now this is connected to something else with a connective particle. And to the left of this particle, we see sen dang dempa. This means qualified. Literally, the construction something dang denpa means having something. So this literally means having characteristics, or having good characteristics. We can just understand for right now, sen dang denpa means qualified. So understanding this all together, we can translate this whole sentence as, there are not many gurus who are qualified, or there are not many qualified gurus. Okay, let's try another one. Korlo ni koro. The verb kor is an intransitive verb, turn. And we know that the subject is marked by the particle ni, so we're left with korlo, wheel. So this is simply the wheel turns. Okay, let's try a more complex sentence. Changchup sempa ni tekchenki lam la jugo. Now, juk means enter or engage. And looking immediately to the left, we have a la particle. To the left of that, we have lam, which means path. So, some subject, which we haven't figured out yet, enters on the path. Now, to the left of lam, we have a connective particle, so we know that this path is going to be qualified in some way. And to the left of that, we see tekchin, Mahayana. So we can either translate this as the path of Mahayana, or simply the Mahayana path. So somebody enters on the Mahayana path. To the left of that, we find ni. So now that we know that the subject is coming. And what do we find for the subject? Changchup sempa, bodhisattva. So now that we have the subject, we can say the bodhisattva enters on the Mahayana path. Okay, let's finish with one more. Gumpe lama di pelyu la shuk so. Now see if you can figure out this one on your own. Feel free to press pause here if you need to take some time. Have you figured it out? The verb shuk is an honorific verb meaning to stay. Stay where? In Nepal. Payula. Who stays in Nepal? Gumpe Lama Di. This guru of the monastery, or this monastery's guru, stays in Nepal. This should be enough to get you started with the homework exercises for lesson 3. But again, if any of this is unclear, or if you have any questions about this week's homework, please feel free to ask on our discussion board.